Good morning. Thank you for joining us here on the KPRC 2 Plus live stream. The third capital murder trial against A.J. Armstrong is nearing an end. The jury is deliberating as we speak. Armstrong is accused of killing his parents in 2016 when he was 16 years old. But as we wait for a verdict, Armstrong also filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Houston over DNA evidence. The family of Armstrong alleges the city planted blood on his clothing to try and get a conviction. The city has not yet responded, but Armstrong's family is sharing more about the lawsuit right now. Let's listen in.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Oh, there's some tape.
Thank you.
Just set it down there. JO has set that up. Just do that.
Perfect.
Let gravity do the rest.
Let me know when y'all are ready.
We're good. We're good. Rolling.
My name is Randall Callanan, and I'm a civil rights lawyer. And I have been retained by Antonio Armstrong because it appears evidence has been planted, probably by the Houston Police Department, right at this very building that we are here today. I would first like to say that the jury has been sequestered, and you would do good to tell your audiences what sequestration means. That means no contact with the outside world at all, including this press conference or anything that's said or anything in this lawsuit that has been filed. As a matter of fact, we could have filed this lawsuit earlier and had this press conference earlier, and the jury might have seen it, but we did not. We waited till sequestration. Now, this lawsuit is about the city of Houston and their long-standing practice of planting evidence. We've all heard of the Harding Street raid, which a few years ago, several people were killed in a fake raid when it was said that this couple was selling heroin, when that turned out to be not true. They raided, killed both of them, killed the dog, and several police officers were injured, including two very seriously, probably by friendly fire, according to the evidence. And as it turns out, that was false evidence. That was planted heroin. Deaths resulted from the planted heroin by the Houston police officers. That has been shown and proven, and the district attorney's office is prosecuting not only that individual, but several officers, because now we see that it was a bunch of Houston police officers that were planting evidence in order to gain felony convictions, just like here it appears that there was DNA planting. If you listen to what HPD witnesses say, this is not just an accusation. I want you to go into the lawsuit, and this is, we rely on sworn testimony that was put into the court. And the lawsuit is, of course, based upon what has been presented in the court. So the timing of this lawsuit has to be after the evidence has been presented, because that's when I find out, everything that they presented in the court. Because if they didn't present the planted evidence, then there's no harm, no foul. But they did present it, and so the ability to file the lawsuit came into existence probably Thursday or Friday of last week, because that was after the DNA evidence was presented. But we didn't file the lawsuit then. We didn't have a press conference then. We waited until they're sequestered, and the jury has no possibility to hear this because they're totally sequestered. So, and the reasons for filing the lawsuit instead of waiting is, one is the statute of limitations. And the statute of limitations on a civil rights lawsuit, you can only go back 2 years from the date you file the lawsuit. So as soon as you have the evidence, it's incumbent upon you to file the lawsuit, because anything that happened more than 2 years ago, and I don't know what has happened when this evidence was planted, because we cannot tell when the evidence was planted right now. I have put out a retention letter, which is another reason we have to get the lawsuit on file, is because then the city of Houston is on notice that the evidence has to be retained. And I have sent notice to the mayor, to the city attorney, and to the city secretary of Houston, as well as 2 other lawyers I know work in the Civil Rights Division, so that they are now on notice of this lawsuit and to retain evidence. And that evidence would be like videos. There's video cameras in this building which will show you who is going to the evidence room and when and what they're pulling out. And there's also sign-in sheets where if you're going to go look at evidence, you have to sign in. And I don't have access to that prior to the lawsuit. I can only gain that through the lawsuit. So that is the reason we filed when we did. It is incumbent upon me to be sure to help with the lawsuit. So we filed the lawsuit when the jury would not hear about it, yet it would preserve all of the rights to AJ, to this civil rights lawsuit. And I'm here today with the members of the family of AJ who are in support of him, just like they always have been through trial number 1, through the second trial, which was 8 not guilty, 4 guilty. That's 8 not guilty, 4 guilty. Yet they decided to have another trial, and that's when the DNA popped up, only when you went to the third trial. Oh, look, there's some DNA that in the courtroom, the experienced homicide investigator who was looking right at AJ and talking to AJ, and he was looking up at him, up and down. And of course he was looking for blood and DNA. He's a homicide investigator. And not only one homicide investigator came across AJ, but several did. And they all testified in court they saw no DNA evidence. So how is it all of a sudden after 7 years, oops, here's the DNA evidence? I think a fair person who looked at all the evidence that we have just right now, without even getting more evidence, would say, this is more likely than not somebody planted there. As a matter of fact, their own expert said that one of the 2 pieces that was found was transferred there. So transferred how? Transferred accidentally or transferred on purpose? I mean, you have the clothes and this very important evidence in a capital murder case. Do you think that people are just throwing it around and touching it all every day? No, they know the importance of it. They know that evidence is extremely important. I think most people, when they see the actual evidence, they're going to say that was planted. And we're here today, the family is here today, not concerned just for AJ, but for the citizens of Houston, because who will have their evidence planted next? I was involved in a case a long time ago that's in the lawsuit where a knife was planted in the vicinity of someone who was shot and killed by the police. And the federal judge in that case, when I filed a civil case, not a criminal case, pointed that out, that look, it appears that someone has altered the scene to make it appear that there was this knife that this individual had, the individual who was shot and killed by the Houston Police Department. And then a long time ago, we had another case historically where another individual was killed. And then you have the Gerald Goings case. Dozens and dozens and dozens of people, Houston citizens, convicted of felonies, put into prison because of planted evidence. And that's just been in the last years. So we see that there is a pattern and practice of the city of Houston of planting evidence. And this case is about planting evidence and ruining people's reputation. Because how many people out there now believe that AJ's father's DNA was actually on him? Some people do. A lot of people don't believe it because of, the circumstances after the 2 trials and so forth, but some do. And you just can't go planting evidence and ruining people's reputations like that, and then trying to convict them of a crime. You can try fairly with the actual evidence, but planting evidence, that's not right. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, so tell us, you kind of mentioned a little bit about the timing of the lawsuit. Tell us about, tell us a little bit about that, you know, why now? And then also, I'm being told that the defense attorney, Mr. Ditoto, didn't know that this was in the works. Is that the case?
I'm not going to reveal all my sources of information. I, of course, as a lawyer, have to notify, you know, that about what I'm doing. But so, what? Let me tell you about the timing of the lawsuit again. Okay. And this will bore you with a lot of legal stuff, unfortunately. Okay, so this case is based upon what's presented in the court. If they don't present the planted evidence in the court, that's not a case, because you didn't plant the evidence. You have what's called no injury. You don't have an injury. So the lawsuit cannot be filed, or shouldn't be filed, until you see what was presented in the court and all the testimony. As a matter of fact, if you look in the lawsuit, I'm relying upon the testimony that was given just last week, and I needed that testimony by the officers. The officers who all said we didn't see any DNA on, or any blood on AJ. So I couldn't have filed it any sooner than after that evidence was presented, which was about Thursday, I think, is when they presented the DNA evidence. And so now we could have filed the lawsuit on Thursday and had a press conference on Friday. We could have done that. And then the jury would have heard about it on Thursday and heard about it on Friday, and the jury would have heard about it on Saturday, and the jury would have heard about it on Sunday and on Monday and they could have heard about this all along. But no, we waited until after they were sequestered. And once again, be sure to tell your audience what sequester means. It means they don't have any access to what I'm saying here today. They don't have any access to this lawsuit. They don't have access to any of that. They are sequestered. But I cannot wait for days, once again, because of the statute of limitations. The statute of limitations, I can only go back 2 years from the date I filed the lawsuit to use that evidence. So what happened exactly 2 years ago? I'm not 100% certain. But if I wait till afterwards, it's that many more days where I can't use that evidence. Furthermore, I want to put the city, which I have, on notice that they have to retain evidence for this civil case. Evidence being like videos of who was over here in this property room, who was looking at the property that was sitting there, the clothing and so forth. Who was it? That's incumbent upon me. I cannot wait. I should not wait. It's my duty to get this lawsuit on file and notice the city of Houston. In this lawsuit, AJ is my client, and I'm doing the best that I can for AJ, and it has nothing to do with what the jury's doing. Once again, they're fully and totally sequestered, and if we would have wanted to do that, would have done this when they weren't sequestered.
Could a member of the family talk about why you're wanting to pursue this civil case so quickly?
I have just told you several times why we wanted to do so good. No. As you know, the prosecution has tried 3 times this case already, and since they might try a 4th time and there's appeals, it's incumbent upon them not to talk until the criminal matter about AJ is completely done. So the family members are here in support, as you see, but they will not be speaking today about this case. Sure.
What are you hoping to get from this lawsuit?
Well, and that's another thing I wanted to point out, that I did notice that in the press it was not mentioned, and I want to show you this because this is very important. It's written right into the lawsuit, and I'll show it to you. This is the end of the lawsuit. It's called the prayer for relief, and that's basically what you're asking for. And if you look at number F, it says, grant injunctive relief to investigate evidence planting in the Houston Police Department and other involved entities. We want this to stop. We want evidence planting at the City of Houston Police Department to stop. That's what we want.
And
I know some of the family members were excused out of the courtroom during the testimony. Is this lawsuit the first time they're actually kind of looking at the testimony?
Looking at, I don't know if they've even looked at it. I filed it, and so if they've looked at it, I don't know. I have no idea whether what the family members have looked at or not looked at.
Does the verdict have any impact on this?
Yes, the verdict could have an impact, and I could get into that if you want me to. However, whether there's a verdict of guilty or not guilty, everybody has the right not to have evidence planted against them. It doesn't really matter because what we're suing against is once the evidence planting and the ruining of the reputation, because now people believe that there was his father's DNA on him when, if you once again, I think a fair reading of all the facts that I've set forward in the lawsuit puts it into doubt that this evidence was not planted.
So you're saying that if there is an acquittal,
Yeah.
that you will still pursue this, yes or no?
If there's an acquittal, yeah, of course we would pursue it. Yeah.
Any monetary, monetary compensation?
Well, we for all of the expenses and the mental anguish and so forth, we are requesting monetary compensation, but that'll be up to the jury. We have not set a number.
What's the motivation, I guess, of HPD engaged in this kind of practice?
To get convictions. That's their job, to get convictions. Ask Gerald Goings. Gerald Goings has, I think the evidence is pretty clear. Gerald Goings planted evidence in dozens and dozens of cases, and it's been found out that a bunch in his group have also been indicted, and about 5 or 6 for also planting evidence. So you have a whole group of law officers planting evidence to get convictions. In many of these instances, that planted evidence was like the only evidence. What do you got? Well, got these drugs. Okay, thank you. You're convicted.
Lives.
What's that?
Just ruins lives.
Yeah. This planting of evidence ruins people's lives, and even if you get the case overturned or you're found not guilty, all of that evidence is still in the court system, and you have the false arrest. So even in cases where the evidence is suppressed or you're found not guilty or the case is dismissed, you still suffer immensely.
And AJ is found guilty today, and you guys are seeking a lawsuit, and an investigation is brought upon HPD. Is this sort of like a backup to maybe reopen this case or something?
Well, once again, the evidence shows that there, I think with a fair reading of the evidence that I put in the complaint and from the testimony of the court by the HPD officers' own mouths and their experts' own mouths, under oath, a person would say this evidence was likely planted. And that is, and whether or not anybody is found guilty or not, or there's another mistrial, it's the planting of the evidence. And we're going to try to ensure that not only for AJ, but for others, that Houston Police Department quits planting evidence.
How does the upcoming trials on the Harding Street raid play into it? Will you still be wanting to interview those guys? Or
yes. Okay, I'll bore you with more civil rights law. In order to get a government libel, such as like say City of Houston, which is a government, or like the county, one of the ways to get them liable is through a pattern and practice of similar behavior. If this was the only instance we could ever dig up of planted evidence, then this government probably would not be liable. But the Goings case and the other cases I mentioned in the lawsuit, and that's why I mentioned it, shows that the government itself should be liable through what's called a pattern and practice of similar constitutional violations. All right, folks. Well, looks like you ran out of questions. I really appreciate you coming here. And once again, I think it's very important that the public know what sequestration is, and not just to mention, oh, they're sequestrated. You need to tell them sequestration means they don't have access to this, they don't have access to the lawsuit, and they have access to nothing we've ever said here. And once again, we could have all done this much earlier, where that would have occurred, where you would have heard about it, but we didn't do that. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.